Hello students, welcome to EPG Patashala. I am Dr. K.R. Ram Mohan, Associate Professor and Head Department of Anthropology, Sikkim University. Today we are going to talk a module on Marxism in Anthropology. So this module comes in the paper Theories and Methods in Social Cultural Anthropology. So before we go to this module, let us see what are the learning objectives. This module will introduce the student to the theory of Marxism used in anthropological thought, the crux of Marxian theory, its main thinkers, the important literary works which come under Marxian influence, a new way of neo-Marxism which has come out of Marxism, and the critique of theory of Marxism. Now, let us see and understand what is Marxist or Marxism or Karl Marx insights and thoughts about society and culture, the evolution, history, and the social change. Marxism is basically a philosophical doctrine. It is also a worldview of understanding and conceptualizing human societies. It has strong economic doctrines, a revolutionary way of social transformation which was developed in mid-19th century by its thinker Karl Marx. Karl Marx was also assisted by another thinker, Friedrich Engels. Marxism, more than a philosophy for many, it is a methodology to analyze social relations, to understand social change, and to understand how societies have evolved. So Marxism is unique in the realm of radical political and social thought. So Marxist understandings have been applied to diverse subjects, particularly in history, in philosophy, in cultural studies, historiography, feminist studies, and other social sciences. So Marxism as a philosophy has further developed into many branches and schools of thought. Now, let us understand how Marxist insights or Marxist understanding of analysis of society has been incorporated into anthropology, and it has given a new branch called Marxist anthropology. So Marxist anthropology is one of the most significant anthropological theory applied to study different cultures around the world. So Marxist anthropology has developed as a critique to the domination of Euro-American capitalism, which has been spread all over the world. Perhaps there are few societies which are not under this banner of capitalism. So Marxist anthropology is based on the writings of these two German philosophers of 19th century, that is Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, which has propagated their analysis in understanding various social forces which have influenced social change in many societies. So Marxist anthropology discusses that it is the material factors or the material conditions are the main cause of social transformation, in any culture or society. So that means whatever material forces or material factors a society possesses, that determines their culture and that determines the social change. So it is basically an economic understanding of history. History means here the history of societies. And anthropologists are interested because we are also interested in delineating what are the factors which are important or which could have influenced social change in these histories. So one understanding is Marxist way of understanding of this whole social transformation. So Marx and Friedrich Engels together laid the emphasis that the forces of production, so each culture has its own production, and their relationship with the social organization. So the crux of Marxist understanding was that given any economic system is inextricably intertwined and it is based on the relationships of power which eventually lead to different classes. And these different classes perhaps could be in a state of struggle, and hence it is called the class struggle according to Marxist thinking. Therefore, Marxist analysis in anthropology or Marxist understanding in anthropology studies various social classes, not only just the social classes, but how conflicts arise among these social classes and what kind of economy is prevailing in these states and what are the various means of production which based on the resources and how the production is being distributed. With these things, which leads to social change in any given culture. So within this strand, Marx developed a particular concept called historical materialism. That means the material forces, the material factors determine the history, which dialectically analyzes and understands the causes of societal development and various reasons for these social changes that have taken place in the societies, which are essentially based on man's economics life or man's economic conditions. Hence, the social classes with the kind of political arrangements which has given an ideology which has been a product of the economic activity. So, economic activity informs the forces and the relationships of production. How people are related, what kind of relations they have when they are producing certain things. Particularly in a capitalist society, you have the bourgeoisie, you have the proletariat, and what kind of social relations they have. He is considered to be, according to Marxian understanding, it's like a pyramid structure. The base of this pyramid structure determines the superstructure above the society. If you put a triangle like this, according to Marxian thinking, the base determines the superstructure in any society. So for Marx, there exists a conflict between the development of material productive forces and the relations of production among them, which perhaps might have given a social revolution that ultimately altered the above superstructure, the model which we are discussing. So Marx described, basing on these understanding, that could be 4 stages of development in history based upon the means of production. And these are, first, the stage could be a primitive communism, the people live together, and this primitive communism which has led to some kind of a slave society where some people try to control the other people, and this slave society might have emerged into a feudalistic society where feudal lords might have controlled the entire society, which further gave the modern society as the capitalist society. Now, within this capitalistic system, Marx gave more importance, and Marx thinking is centered around the origins of this capitalistic system, which has been there entire Europe, that there is an exploitation of one class by other, which gives the socio-economic feature of the society. So those who own the means of production and control the relations of this production are called bourgeoisie, and where they are trying to control and exploit those who work under them. And the entire working class, which are masses, are considered to be the proletariat. So there are 2 types of social relations here, 2 types of groups. One is the few, the top bourgeoisie, and the base with lot of people who are working under them are called proletariats. So Marx was very critical of this capitalistic structure, and he opined that in this capitalism there is a form of exploitation of the workers due to surplus production and profit making by the capitalist class. And this exploitation of workers in capitalistic societies was inevitable, and the workers are in a state of alienation, that a feeling of estrangement, that we are not considered this part of the society. You are something different. And alienation was an objective characterization of the classes or the working class situation, particularly in the capitalist society. Let us examine who are the most influential thinkers under Marxian thought. Apart from Friedrich Engels, Erich Wolff has significantly influenced by Marxian understanding, and he published a lot of work on the modes of production in his book called Europe and the People Without History. That shows that people are there for many years, but there is no history because they are under certain class. We have other thinkers like Maurice Bloch, Antonio Gramsci, Louis Althusser, and Maurice Godelier. During Marxian influence for a long period of time, there were excellent literature which has been produced under the aegis of Marxian thought and its analysis. The most important is the Economic and Political Philosophical Manuscript, Communist Manifesto by Marx, Das Kapital or Capital, ancient society by the origin of family and private property and the state, the evolution of culture, and perspectives in Marxist anthropology. This book is a collection of essays by Maurice Godelier, which discuss the possible application of different forms of Marxist way of analysis to all the cultures even before capitalism has swept the entire globe. Being understood that Marxian analysis is basically trying to see the society as an economic unit, and this economic unit is derived by the means of production, how people produce by certain means. While producing the means, people had certain relations, and what kind of relations were there? The means of relations towards the production, and most importantly, this is all under a capitalistic structure. With this also, Marx proposed that a society could be understood as the base and superstructure, and the base is nothing but the economy and the relations which produce religion, which produce ideologies by the superstructure at the top. Now, to what extent Marxian influence has contributed to anthropological thinking? So there is a new brand of thinkers which calls themselves as neo-Marxists or neo-Marxism, which has developed in 20th century, has been used either to adjust, revise, or to extend Marxian thinking in one form or the other by taking or integrating the intellectual tradition given by the Marxian scholars. So neo-Marxism as a loose theory integrates both Max Weber's approach to social inequality and Marxian understanding of inequality. Because Marx said, or according to Marxian thinking, social inequalities existing because there is a division of labor. People are different with the class, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. And Weber's thinking of social inequality. So neo-Marxism forms a new political ideology that is often considered as the new left. Neo-Marxism arose to answer all that was not explained in the traditional Marxian approach, that why certain societies go or take social change in the course of time. So neo-Marxists want to reanalyze the whole Marxian work to answer many socio-political problems which the traditional Marxian understanding did not answer. Having understood the historical materialism under Marxian thinking, Marxian thought also proposes that all inequalities can be understood, and all inequalities are in any society is being basically on the economy which a society produces. So we also understood that these forces which influence, for example, the means of production and the relations between who was producing the means of production, which determine the structure of the society, in a sense that it is like a pyramid shape with the base and the superstructure. So within this realm, there is another concept which come into Marxian understanding is the cultural Marxism. Along with this analytical Marxism, an ideology that stated that non-economic aspects or cultural dimensions will and cause all the social inequalities in any society. So how does this happen? What is the root for these cultural issues which gives these inequalities apart from the economic aspects that create a wider distance between one class of people and the another class of people? Now, it is often regarded as a conspiracy to see how Western influences or the Western imperialistic forces determines the local cultures. It is how been floated by what we call the Frankfurt School, dealing with this critical aspects of how a certain hegemonic aspects which influence the local cultures. And this people comes under this cultural Marxism. And the famous thinkers in this school of thought are the Freud, Hegel, and Immanuel Kant, along with Weber. So they try to use these methods particularly in psychoanalysis and anti-positivist philosophy. Psychoanalysis is a method of analysis which tries to see the whole development of sexual socialization, the binary opposites between genders, and the anti-positivist philosophy. They says that there are certain human elements which the pure science cannot understand. That means subjective elements are more important rather than the objective elements, which gives what we call in existential philosophy, that means the lived experience, how to understand one's existential problems, which science cannot give solutions to human existential problems. So in that way, Frankfurt School, which is famous for this cultural materialistic understanding, which gives more importance to the works of Urian Habermas, which gives an influence on how people develop a communicative reason and the process of intersubjectivity, and an analysis of linguistics which have been produced through text, and lastly the discourse on modernism and how a philosophical understanding can be done to explain all these inequalities in the social realm in particular societies. Knowing the basic tenets of Marxism, neo-Marxism, cultural Marxism, many anthropologists do not agree fully the crux of Marxian analysis in tracing the history of the societies, nature of the societies, divisions of the societies, and the economies which have been formed through generations. So Marxism has been one of the most influential, let's say a dominant tradition in most of the social sciences, particularly history and economics, and to some extent influenced sociology and anthropology. So the contemporary supports of Marxism find that though the whole structure is important, but they did not give full attention to the finer aspects of social institutions. For instance, the ideas were collaborated with ideas to form, especially with the Frankfurt School. For many scholars, especially the Frankfurt School or neo-Marxists, they rejected some of the paradigms floated by Karl Marx on many grounds. That ethically it is wrong, empirically it is not found, and how can the whole classification of the societies can be boiled down to only the economic relations of the people. There could be so many other forces might have influenced the entire process of social change that Marx did not explain. Marx did not give the inequalities of gender inequalities in a capitalist society. So, in a democratic setup, how can we come this Marxian understanding? Capitalist society can be understood, but how can democratic society can be explained? How can socialism can be explained? So in that sense, this becomes some kind of an utopia where it is something like a conjecture without looking for the facts. And it could be an individual anarchist. So we are critical in understanding to what extent Marxian understanding can explain a pre-literate society, a rural society, an urban society, and what factors might have changed of all these varieties of complex civilizational process. So scholars are very critical about the overemphasis or overindulgence of the economic transactions. What Marx has said, that the means of production are important, and the relationship of means of production between the people are important, and the theory of social classes like bourgeoisie, the proletariat. But in many societies, these things are not there. So how does Marxism produce as a overarching generalized umbrella theory for all the societies? So Marxism is being accused of that it is economically deterministic, that this whole economic relationship have overshadowed the other finer aspects like family, origin of family he did not say, how kinship relationships are formed between people, Marxian analysis did not say, incest taboo, Marxist analysis did not say, education or religion, Marx has only said that it is opium of the masses. And Marx has only said that religion is a product because of the base. Base determines the superstructure. Base determines the ideology. But how? We have different religions in this world. Base did not determine the religion. So for Marx, essentially everything in society depended on the economic factors. So this is how it lacked the holistic nature of anthropological understanding. Because anthropology, in its spirit, in its endeavor, looks for the holistic aspects of society or in any given culture. So in what way it is unified? One can question. It is not unified. It is like bits and pieces. And the explanation given of social inequalities and power struggle is only purely economic terms. But there are many societies in this world, struggles did not only for economic resources. There are other reasons which have been ascribed in explaining social tensions or conflicts. And all the societies are not capitalistic societies. So in that sense, Marxism failed to come to grasp to explain the social realities both historically and even contextually. So by concentrating on the conflict that arises due to economic relationships, Marx has ignored, like I said, the conflicts that take place in other spheres of society, like the conflict between a male and female, the conflict between siblings at psychologically, the conflict over social power has not been dealt, though he has said that conflicts and social struggle arise only due to economic powers or economic resources. How can we say that Marxian perspectives are everything in terms of conflict? Because Marxian analysis only see and examine the social relationships only on conflictual basis. Given the veracity of all the societies in the world, do not survive just only on conflictual relationship. On the other hand, there is consensus. How do we explain that? How do we explain social cohesion? How do we explain social contract? How do we explain equilibrium? How do we explain the long-term sustainability of a culture without any major social changes? It could be a small pre-literate society without any economic institution or maximum institution. So Marxian understanding, though it was influential in giving lot of insights to understanding the class struggle or the social inequalities, perhaps it is limited only to the European societies, but it did not give a full range of explanations to many issues that have confronted mankind for longer periods of time. And today, many scholars are very critical, particularly feminist scholars are very critical of Marxian analysis of gender relations. And they ask how Marx did not find the contributions made by the women as a class in a capitalist society. Why Marx has put women as only just producers of the labor? In what sense it has credited the full understanding of every finer aspect of society? To summarize the whole Marxian understanding and Marxian thought and contributions to anthropological literature, the role of Marxism cannot be ignored because it brought a theory and a method in analyzing the inequalities in the society. Marxian model also gave some scheme towards how economies have started from primitive communism to feudal societies to imperial societies, then we have the capitalist society. This scheme has come out with the economic reasoning, and that is given by Marx and Engels. Marx also been very influential in giving that a model that ideologies created by one class is nothing but the base that a society has. The base is nothing but the economic production. So a society can be understood by its economic production. A society can be understood the kind of relations people have in this production. He gave the two classes like bourgeoisie and proletariat, and the petit bourgeois, which are the neo classes. But Marxism failed a number of questions in anthropological reasoning, particularly the class conflict, which have not given enough evidence, and the kind of social change that taken place in many society. Why one society is fully developed? Why one society is still that? Is it per se that the society did not want to change on its own, or there were no external influences for that community to not to change itself to another level? These things are very unanswered. Perhaps anthropologists can use this method of historical materialism to study, but not to the extent. Or in the contemporary world, how certain governments have dethroned a philosophy of Marxism could not explain. Marxian philosophy cannot put into the revolutions that have taken place in Asian continents and in other parts of the world. And Marxism could not explain why some societies are still coherent. Nevertheless, Marxian understanding, Marxian analysis has triggered a lot of interest, and many anthropological works have taken some insights from Marxian understanding, and they produced ethnographies and dealing the analysis of social inequalities and class struggle in some parts of the society.